Sometimes, the loudest abuse of power begins with four simple words. I'm calling the police. The soccer ball rolled across the bright green common lawn, slowing to a stop beside a wooden bench warmed by the late afternoon sun. For one perfect second, laughter floated through the neighborhood like birdsong. 8 children chased after it with flushed cheeks and grass-stained sneakers, their voices echoing between rows of neat suburban homes. Parents watched from folding chairs, iced drinks sweating in their hands. Someone flipped burgers on a nearby grill. The smell of charcoal drifted lazily through the summer air. It looked like the kind of Saturday every family hoped to remember. Then a sharp voice sliced through it. Stop right there. Heads turned all at once. Karen Whitmore marched across the lawn with the confidence of someone who expected the entire world to step aside. Her navy HOA polo was crisply pressed, sunglasses perched high on perfectly styled blonde hair. One hand gripped a thick folder stamped with the Homeowners Association logo. The other pointed directly at the children, as if she were identifying suspects at a crime scene. They're damaging community property, she declared loudly enough for every nearby patio to hear. This is private HOA land. No organized sports are allowed here. The laughter disappeared almost instantly. A little boy trapped the soccer ball beneath his shoe and looked toward his father. Daniel Carter slowly stood from the bench. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in faded jeans and an old gray t-shirt, he looked nothing like someone searching for an argument. He brushed fresh-cut grass from his palms before walking toward Karen with measured steps. Afternoon, he said calmly. They're just kids enjoying the weekend. Karen's expression hardened. They can enjoy it somewhere else. Daniel glanced around the open lawn. There were no flower beds, no warning signs, no reserved event, just open grass stretching beneath a cloudless sky. I checked the community rules before bringing them here, he replied politely. This area is listed as shared recreational space. Karen let out a short laugh that carried no humor. Don't. Tell me how this neighborhood works. A few parents exchanged uneasy glances. One mother quietly called her daughter back from the field. Another father folded his camping chair without saying a word. Nobody wanted trouble with the HOA. Karen seemed to notice the silence spreading through the crowd, and it only encouraged her. You people always think the rules are for someone else. Daniel kept his hands at his sides. His son, Ethan, watched nervously from behind him, still holding the soccer ball against his chest. Dad, the boy whispered. Daniel smiled gently without taking his eyes off Karen. It's okay. For a heartbeat. It seemed the confrontation might simply fade away. Karen reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone. You've left me no choice. She pressed 3 numbers. 9, 1, 1. Several parents froze. One mother actually gasped. Daniel blinked once, clearly surprised. You're calling emergency services because children are playing soccer? Karen didn't answer him. Instead, she turned slightly so everyone could hear. Yes, I'd like to report an ongoing disturbance, she said into the receiver. There are individuals refusing to obey HOA regulations. They're creating a dangerous situation for the neighborhood. The children stared in confused silence. One little girl quietly asked her older brother, Are we in trouble? No one answered. Far away, almost too faint to notice, the first echo of a police siren drifted across the neighborhood. Karen folded her arms. For the first time since arriving, she smiled. Not because peace had returned, but because she believed she had already won. Daniel looked down at Ethan, whose fingers tightened around the worn black and white soccer ball. He rested a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder, his voice barely above a whisper. No matter what happens next, remember this. You never have to be the loudest person in the room to be right. The sirens grew closer. The first patrol car turned onto Maple Ridge Drive with its lights flashing, but its siren fading into silence, as if even the officers knew this was hardly the emergency someone had claimed it to be. The neighborhood held its breath. Children instinctively stepped behind their parents. Lawn chairs scraped across the concrete as people quietly backed away from the field, creating an invisible circle around Daniel Carter and Karen Whitmore. Moments earlier, it had been the sound of laughter that filled the afternoon. Now the loudest noise came from the slow ticking of a cooling barbecue grill. Karen stood perfectly still, her chin lifted in quiet satisfaction. She had called. They had come. In her mind, that alone proved she was right. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser. The older one, Officer Michael Reyes adjusted the body camera clipped neatly to the center of his uniform before scanning the scene. His younger partner, Officer Evan Brooks, looked from the frightened children to the soccer ball resting harmlessly in the grass. Officer Reyes approached first. "Good afternoon. We received a report of an active disturbance." Karen answered before anyone else could. Finally, she pointed directly at Daniel without even looking at him. "This man has been refusing lawful HOA instructions. These children have been damaging community property for nearly an hour." Officer Brooks glanced at the lawn. The grass was freshly cut. No torn sod. No broken sprinklers. No damaged landscaping. Nothing suggested destruction. Daniel waited until Karen finished before speaking. "Afternoon, officers." His voice remained calm. "My son and a few neighborhood kids have been kicking a soccer ball around. That's all." Officer Reyes nodded slowly. "Did anyone threaten anyone?" "No." "Any physical altercation?" "No, sir." "Any property damage?" Daniel looked around before answering. "Not that I'm aware of." Karen immediately interrupted. "They're violating HOA regulations." Officer Reyes shifted his attention toward her. "Ma'am, HOA rules and criminal violations aren't necessarily the same thing." Her smile disappeared for a fraction of a second. "They're creating a public nuisance." The officer looked toward the children again. One little girl was tying her untied shoelace. Another boy quietly picked clover flowers beside the sidewalk. Ethan still held the soccer ball tightly against his chest as though it had somehow become dangerous. Officer Brooks crouched beside him. "Hey, buddy." Ethan looked up nervously. "Is that your ball?" The boy nodded. "Having fun today?" Another quiet nod. Brooks smiled. "It looks like a pretty good game." Ethan almost smiled back before glancing toward Karen. His expression faded again. Officer Reyes turned toward Daniel. "Would you mind showing me where this happened?" Daniel simply pointed at the open field. "This is where we've been the whole time. No arguments. Only after we were told the kids couldn't play." Karen folded her arms tighter. "They're leaving out the important part." Officer Reyes remained patient. "And what's that?" "I'm a member of the HOA board." She spoke the title carefully, giving every word extra weight. "I instructed them to leave." The older officer gave a polite nod. "I understand." Then he paused. "But being on the HOA board doesn't make police enforcement automatic." Several neighbors lowered their eyes, hiding faint smiles. Karen noticed. Color slowly crept into her face. "So you're refusing to do your job?" "No, ma'am." His answer came evenly. "We're determining whether a crime has occurred." Silence settled over the lawn. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh pine from the walking trail beyond the homes. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rang softly. Officer Brooks quietly walked the edge of the field, studying the ground. His gaze lingered on the spotless grass before returning to the children. Nothing matched the urgency of the dispatch call. Back near the sidewalk, Officer Reyes took one final look around the peaceful neighborhood. Parents, kids, a soccer ball. No shouting, no fighting, no vandalism. Just nervous faces waiting for his next words. Karen stood straighter, completely convinced the officers would order everyone to leave. Daniel rested a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder, saying nothing at all. Neither of them noticed the tiny blinking light on Officer Reyes's body camera. It had been recording every word since the moment he stepped out of the patrol car. The decision lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet it changed everything. Officer Michael Reyes took one slow breath before looking at Karen. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "we're not seeing evidence of a criminal violation." For the first time that afternoon, complete silence settled over the common lawn. Karen blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The children are playing. They're violating HOA regulations." "That may be an HOA matter," Reyes replied. "It isn't a police matter." A breeze rustled the oak trees lining Maple Ridge Drive. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler clicked rhythmically across another yard, completely unaware that an invisible battle had just shifted direction. Karen's jaw tightened. "So you're just leaving?" Officer Brooks exchanged a brief glance with his partner. "We've confirmed there is no immediate public safety issue." Daniel never smiled. He didn't celebrate. He simply squeezed Ethan's shoulder once, a quiet signal that everything was all right. The little boy finally loosened his grip on the soccer ball. Around them, parents began breathing again. Someone quietly unfolded the lawn chair they had started packing. A younger child cautiously kicked the ball a few inches before stopping. unsure whether it was truly over. It wasn't. Karen wasn't finished. She stepped closer to Officer Reyes, lowering her voice just enough to sound serious. You don't understand. I sit on the HOA board. I know exactly who these people are. Daniel looked toward the ground. Not because he felt defeated, because he'd learned long ago that some arguments only grew louder when someone tried to win them. Officer Reyes remained polite. I appreciate that, ma'am. But unless someone is breaking the law, we can't remove people from a public common area simply because an HOA board member requests it. Her face hardened. So homeowners have no protection now? They do. But our authority and the HOA's authority aren't the same. The words landed heavier than anyone expected. Several neighbors lowered their eyes. Others pretended to check their phones. No one wanted Karen to notice the relief slowly spreading across their faces. Karen noticed anyway. And embarrassment quickly transformed into anger. This isn't over. Nobody answered. Officer Brooks gave Ethan a small nod. Looks like you've got a pretty good left foot. The boy looked at his father before answering. I usually play goalie. Brooks laughed softly. Keep practicing. For just a second, the neighborhood felt normal again. The officers returned to their cruiser. The flashing lights disappeared around the corner. The children hesitated. Daniel looked across the field. It's your game. No one moved. Not until Ethan gently rolled the ball forward. Another boy tapped it back. Then another. Within moments, the laughter returned, quieter this time, almost cautious, as though every child had learned that happiness could be interrupted without warning. Karen watched from the sidewalk. She said nothing, but her eyes never left Daniel. He could feel them. As families slowly gathered their coolers and backpacks later that evening, conversations became whispers. She actually called the police. I can't believe it. Daniel handled that well. Still, I'd hate to end up on the HOA's bad side. Those last words lingered. Daniel heard them. So did Karen. The difference was that one heard fear. The other heard opportunity. The next morning, Maple Ridge Estates looked exactly the same. Perfect lawns. Fresh flowers. American flags swaying gently from white porches. But at precisely 8:12 a.m., Daniel's inbox chimed with a new email. The sender read, Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. The subject line was short. Notice of violation. Daniel opened it. His expression never changed. According to the letter, he had organized an unauthorized athletic event, ignored directives from an HOA board member, disturbed neighborhood peace, and exposed the association to potential liability. The proposed fine totaled $500. Payment was due in 10 days. Near the bottom appeared a single line that felt colder than every accusation above it. Failure to comply may result in additional enforcement action. Across town, Karen leaned back in her office chair and clicked send. Only then did she smile. She believed the police had failed. Now the HOA would finish what she had started. There are two kinds of people when they receive a threat. Some panic. Others start collecting facts. Daniel Carter quietly became the second. The violation notice remained open on his laptop long after Ethan had gone to bed. The soft glow of the screen filled the small kitchen while the coffee in his mug slowly turned cold. Outside, the neighborhood rested beneath a calm summer night. Porch lights flickered across Maple Ridge Estates, making every home look peaceful. Only one house no longer felt like home. Daniel read the letter again. $500. Unauthorized athletic event. Failure to obey an HOA board member. Potential liability. The words were carefully chosen. Professional. Cold. Designed to intimidate. He closed his eyes for a moment before opening the community governing documents he had downloaded months earlier when he bought the house. 312 pages. Declarations. Rules. Architectural standards. Board procedures. Most homeowners would never read them. Daniel started on page 1. Hour after hour, he highlighted paragraphs, added notes, and compared every accusation in the notice with the actual language in the governing documents. His engineering career had taught him something simple. Every system leaves a trail. You only have to be patient enough to find it. Near midnight, Ethan walked into the kitchen rubbing his eyes. Dad, Daniel looked up immediately. You should be asleep. I couldn't. The boy climbed onto the chair beside him. Are we going to have to move? The question landed harder than any fine ever could. Daniel reached over and ruffled his son's hair. No. You promise? I promise. Ethan looked at the laptop screen filled with highlighted paragraphs he couldn't understand. Are you writing them back? Daniel smiled faintly. Not yet. What are you doing? I'm reading. The boy frowned. Just reading? For now. Ethan nodded, accepting the answer only because it came from his father. Before returning to bed, he stopped in the doorway. I still think Officer Reyes was nice. Daniel looked toward the hallway. So do I. Then Ethan asked a question so ordinary that Daniel almost missed its importance. Why was there a little red light on his shirt? Daniel blinked. The camera. The police camera. It was recording. Everything, wasn't it? Daniel stared at the dark laptop screen after Ethan disappeared upstairs. Body camera. The words settled quietly into place. He opened a new browser tab. The next morning began differently. Instead of writing an angry response to the HOA, Daniel stopped by the county records office before work. Then he submitted a public records request for the responding officer's body camera footage and dispatch logs. No accusations. No emotional language. Just paperwork. From there, he drove to the neighborhood clubhouse. The property manager greeted him politely. Can I help you? I'd like copies of the meeting minutes approving the current recreational area rules. She hesitated. I'll have to check whether those are available. Daniel simply nodded. No problem. As he turned to leave, his eyes drifted toward the ceiling. A small security camera overlooked the clubhouse entrance. Another watched the parking lot. Another covered the hallway leading into the board meeting room. He didn't say a word. He simply noticed. Across the neighborhood, Karen Whitmore enjoyed a very different morning. She forwarded Daniel's violation notice to several board members with a short message, finally addressing ongoing resident misconduct. Within minutes, replies began arriving. Good work. About time. Need to set an example. Karen leaned back in her chair, satisfied. As far as she knew, Daniel was probably searching for a way to pay the fine. She imagined stress, arguments, maybe even a family preparing to leave the neighborhood. She never imagined him sitting quietly in his truck outside the clubhouse, writing one sentence into a small spiral notebook. Every camera sees something. Every document tells a story. He closed the notebook, started the engine, and drove away without realizing someone had been watching him from the clubhouse window. Not Karen, an elderly resident standing silently behind half-closed blinds. She had witnessed the confrontation on the soccer field, and for the first time in years, she wondered whether someone was finally willing to stand up to the HOA. The truth rarely arrives with flashing lights. Sometimes it comes carrying a casserole. 2 evenings after submitting his records requests, Daniel Carter was trimming the edge of his front lawn when he noticed an elderly woman standing quietly across the street. She wasn't waving. She wasn't smiling. She simply watched for a moment before slowly walking toward him, holding a covered glass baking dish with both hands. I made too much chicken pot pie, she said softly. Daniel smiled politely. That's kind of you. I'm Eleanor Brooks. I know. She looked over her shoulder before lowering her voice. I've lived here 23 years. Daniel accepted the dish. Thank you. Eleanor didn't leave. Instead, she glanced toward Karen Whitmore's house at the end of the street. She wasn't always on the board. Daniel remained silent. He had learned that people often revealed more when they weren't interrupted. Eleanor sighed. Most people around here stopped speaking up years ago. A breeze carried the scent of freshly watered grass between them. Children rode bicycles farther down the sidewalk, but even they instinctively avoided passing Karen's driveway. Daniel noticed. So why tell me this? Because you didn't yell. Her answer came almost immediately. You didn't threaten her. You didn't lose your temper. You just stood there. She studied his face for another moment. I've been waiting a long time to see someone do that. Daniel looked toward his front porch. I don't want to fight. I know. You want fairness. For the first time since the soccer game, someone had said exactly what he had been thinking. Eleanor reached into her sweater pocket. I almost threw this away. She handed him a small white envelope. Inside was an old USB flash drive. Daniel frowned. What's this? My security camera. His eyes lifted. It records farther than most people realize. She looked down at the sidewalk. I saved the footage because something about that afternoon didn't sit right with me. Daniel turned the tiny drive over in his hand. You never showed anyone? I was afraid. The words barely escaped her lips. You'd be surprised what fear can make good people do. That evening, Daniel plugged the drive into his laptop. The video wasn't perfect. The angle came from across the street. The audio faded in and out whenever the wind picked up. But the pictures were clear. The The timestamp showed the beginning of the confrontation. The children were laughing. Parents were talking. No one appeared upset. Then Karen entered the frame. Daniel watched without blinking. She walked directly toward the children before anyone approached her. She pointed first, raised her voice second. Only after nearly 2 minutes of confrontation did Daniel leave the bench to speak with her. He replayed the footage. Again, then again. One detail caught his attention. Karen repeatedly stepped closer to Daniel, not the other way around. Another detail. She pointed toward the children before any soccer ball had touched the flower beds she later claimed were damaged. Then came the moment that changed everything. Just seconds before dialing 911, Karen looked around the neighborhood. Not frightened, not threatened, simply checking who was watching. Then she straightened her shoulders. And only then did she make the call. Daniel paused the video. His reflection stared back at him from the dark computer screen. This wasn't proof that Karen had broken the law, but it was proof that her story wasn't complete. His phone buzzed. A new email. County Records Office. Public Records Request Received. Body camera footage request. Processing. Dispatch audio request. Processing. Estimated completion, 5 business days. Daniel quietly closed the email. For the first time since receiving the violation notice, he felt something stronger than frustration. Momentum. Across the neighborhood, Karen poured herself a glass of wine and glanced out her dining room window. She noticed Daniel's porch light still glowing well past 10 o'clock. A faint smile crossed her face. She imagined a man buried under legal paperwork, overwhelmed by fines, losing sleep over consequences he could no longer escape. She had no idea that less than a mile away, an old security camera had already begun dismantling the version of events she believed everyone would accept. And somewhere inside the county evidence system, another camera was waiting to tell the rest of the story. Power is rarely exposed by one mistake. It reveals itself through a pattern. 5 days later, Daniel's phone vibrated while he was reviewing blueprints at work. County Records Division. His public records request had been completed. He left the office during lunch, drove across town, and returned carrying a plain brown envelope no thicker than a magazine. There was nothing dramatic about it. No courtroom, no television cameras, just paperwork, the kind that changes lives quietly. That evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep upstairs, Daniel spread everything across the dining room table. The body camera footage, the dispatch log, the incident report, a digital copy of the 911 recording. His laptop played the videos side by side with Eleanor's security footage. Every angle, every second, every word. Officer Reyes's camera confirmed exactly what Daniel remembered. The children had never shouted. No one threatened Karen. No property had been damaged. Most importantly, before Karen ever identified herself as an HOA board member, she had already told dispatch that residents were refusing lawful orders and creating an escalating public disturbance. Daniel paused the recording. He listened again. The words sounded far more serious than the scene the officers had actually encountered. He opened the dispatch transcript. The emergency operator had asked one simple question. Is anyone in immediate danger? Karen hadn't answered directly. Instead, she said, someone needs to get here before this gets out of control. Daniel leaned back. That sentence explained why police had responded with urgency. Not because violence existed, because it had been implied. He wrote another note in his spiral notebook. Words create consequences. Then something else caught his attention. At the bottom of the incident report sat a small reference number connected to previous service calls involving the same address. He frowned. Most people would have ignored it. Daniel didn't. The following afternoon, he returned to the county records office and submitted another public records request. This time, he wasn't asking about the soccer game. He requested previous police responses associated with Karen Whitmore's residence and HOA complaints involving public common areas. The clerk looked up. That's a fairly specific request. Daniel smiled politely. I know. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. It contained summaries rather than complete reports, but they were enough. Over the previous 4 years, officers had responded to Maple Ridge Estates again, and again, and again. Noise complaints, children riding bicycles, teenagers using the basketball court after dinner, neighbors walking dogs through the park. Most calls ended the same way. No criminal violation observed. Civil or HOA matter. No enforcement action taken. Daniel continued turning pages. Nearly every report listed the same reporting party, Karen Whitmore. He stopped counting after the 8th incident. His eyes drifted toward the family photo sitting beside the lamp. He wasn't looking at an isolated disagreement anymore. He was looking at a habit, a system, a woman who had learned that calling the police often frightened people long before officers ever arrived. The reports couldn't prove malicious intent, but together they revealed something impossible to ignore, a pattern of escalating authority whenever someone refused to obey her. Across the neighborhood, Karen prepared for the upcoming monthly HOA board meeting. Violation notices rested in neat stacks across her dining room table. She signed each one with quick, confident strokes. To her, rules weren't merely guidelines. They were leverage. She never noticed the newest agenda item added that afternoon by the community property manager. Homeowner appeal, Daniel Carter. Scheduled speaker. 20 minutes. Supporting evidence to be presented. Karen smiled when she saw his name. Finally, she whispered to herself. She imagined an angry homeowner desperate to avoid paying a fine. She pictured excuses, emotion, maybe even an apology. She had no reason to suspect that Daniel no longer intended to argue about a single afternoon on the soccer field. He intended to place 6 separate police reports, 1 security video, 2 body camera recordings, dispatch audio, the HOA governing documents, and her own violation. Notice onto the same table. Because one incident can be explained away, a pattern cannot. And for the first time in years, Karen Whitmore was walking into a meeting where someone else had done all the homework. The room was already divided before a single word was spoken. Folded metal chairs filled the Maple Ridge Community Hall in neat rows. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing the room in a pale glow that made every expression look slightly colder than it truly was. Along one wall, a coffee urn steamed beside a tray of untouched cookies. No one seemed interested in refreshments. They had come for something else. The monthly HOA board meeting began exactly at 7 o'clock. Karen Whitmore sat at the center of the long table beneath the association's framed mission statement, building better neighborhoods together. The words looked almost ironic. She wore a navy blazer, her paperwork arranged in perfect stacks, every page squared with the edge of the table. Confidence radiated from the smallest details. She greeted fellow board members with calm smiles, exchanged quiet jokes, and occasionally glanced toward the audience. She was waiting for Daniel. When he finally entered, the room grew noticeably quieter. He wasn't carrying a lawyer. He wasn't carrying a camera crew. Just a slim black binder. Nothing more. He nodded politely to a few neighbors who offered nervous smiles before taking a seat in the second row. No speeches. No dramatic entrance. Karen almost looked disappointed. The HOA president cleared his throat. Next agenda item. Homeowner appeal regarding violation notice issued to Mr. Daniel Carter. Karen folded her hands together. This should be straightforward. Several board members nodded. One whispered, 5 minutes, maybe. Karen believed the same. From her perspective, the facts were simple. Children violated community standards. She instructed them to stop. The homeowner refused. A violation notice followed. Case closed. The HOA president looked toward Daniel. Mr. Carter, you'll have 20 minutes. Daniel stood. Thank you. His voice remained steady enough that several neighbors leaned forward to hear better. I'm not here to argue about children playing soccer. Karen's eyebrows lifted slightly. I'm here because I believe the violation notice was based on an incomplete version of what happened. She smiled politely. You're certainly entitled to your opinion. Daniel acknowledged her with a small nod. I appreciate that. Then he placed the black binder on the podium. The sound echoed softly through the quiet room. Not loudly. Just enough to remind everyone that paper can sometimes weigh more than anger. He opened the binder. Inside were neatly organized tabs. HOA governing documents. Violation notice. Police reports. Public records. Video evidence. Several board members exchanged curious glances. Karen remained relaxed. She assumed paperwork alone couldn't change anything. Daniel didn't begin with accusations. Instead, he held up the violation notice. This document states that an unauthorized athletic event created a public disturbance. He paused. I'd simply like to understand how that conclusion was reached. The HOA president looked toward Karen. She answered immediately. The responding officers were called because residents refused multiple requests to comply. Daniel quietly turned another page. I have the responding officer's incident report. He didn't read it aloud. He simply placed a copy before the HOA president, then another before the property manager, then another before each board member. One by one. No theatrics. No raised voice. Only documents. Karen's smile weakened almost imperceptibly. The room remained silent except for the faint sound of paper sliding across polished wood. A board member adjusted his glasses and began reading. Another stopped halfway down the first page. The HOA president frowned. Daniel waited. He never interrupted. Never explained. He allowed the reports to speak before he did. Across the audience, Eleanor Brooks quietly folded her hands in her lap. She recognized the patience. Truth didn't need to hurry. Karen finally broke the silence. Those reports don't change the fact that HOA rules were ignored. Daniel looked at her for the first time that evening. No, they don't. They simply establish what the police actually observed. The distinction settled over the room like dust after a storm. Small, quiet, impossible to ignore. Several neighbors exchanged uncertain looks. Karen could feel something shifting. Not opinions. Confidence. For the first time since she dialed 911 on the soccer field, she realized she was no longer controlling the conversation. And Daniel still hadn't shown anyone the videos. Silence has a different sound when certainty begins to collapse. No one spoke as the board members continued reading the police reports spread across the table. The only noise came from pages turning. Karen sat perfectly still. She had spent years controlling meetings like this one. Raise a concern. Quote the bylaws. Call for a vote. Move on. This felt different. People were no longer listening to her. They were reading. Daniel waited until every board member had finished. Then he reached into the binder once more. I'd like to show one video. The HOA president nodded. Go ahead. Daniel connected a small flash drive to the meeting room projector. The screen at the front of the hall flickered to life. A grainy image appeared. The timestamp matched the afternoon of the soccer game. Eleanor Brooks' security camera. No music accompanied the footage. No dramatic editing. Just reality. Children laughed. Parents talked quietly. A soccer ball rolled across the grass. Karen entered the frame. Every eye in the room followed her movements. She walked directly toward the children. She pointed. She raised her voice. She continued moving closer. The video showed Daniel leaving the park bench only after nearly 2 minutes of confrontation. No one interrupted her. No one surrounded her. No one threatened her. The recording ended just as she reached for her phone. Daniel pressed pause. He looked toward the board. This angle has no audio. He spoke calmly. So I'd like to add the responding officer's body camera recording. The second video began. Officer Reyes stepped from his patrol car. The small red recording light blinked steadily in the corner of the screen. Neighbors shifted uneasily in their chairs. They watched Karen confidently describe an escalating disturbance. Then they watched the officers inspect the park. No damaged landscaping. No aggressive behavior. No frightened residents. Only children holding soccer balls. Officer Reyes' voice filled the room. This appears to be an HOA matter, not a criminal matter. Daniel stopped the video. No one spoke. He reached for one final document. The dispatch transcript. He handed copies down the table. A board member quietly read aloud. Is anyone in immediate danger? He looked lower on the page. Someone needs to get here before this gets out of control. The room became impossibly still. Karen leaned forward. That's being taken out of context. Daniel turned toward her. It isn't. His voice remained almost gentle. It is the complete transcript. She opened her mouth to answer. Nothing came. Daniel wasn't finished. He removed another folder. This contains summaries of previous police responses requested through public records. The HOA president accepted them. His expression changed after only the second page. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each report described nearly identical outcomes. No criminal violation. Civil dispute. No enforcement action. Same reporting party. Karen Whitmore. A younger board member looked up slowly. There are 8 of these? Daniel answered with one word. Documented. No accusation. No opinion. Just documented. The property manager quietly removed his glasses. I wasn't aware of this history. Neither were most of the homeowners sitting behind Daniel. Whispers spread through the audience. I remember that. That was the kids on Willow Court. She called the police over bicycles. I thought it was just rumors. Karen's face flushed. They're twisting years of responsible enforcement into some kind of campaign against me. Daniel shook his head. No, I believe every resident deserves rules that are applied fairly. He rested one hand on the binder. My concern isn't one violation notice. It's a repeated pattern of using emergency services to settle neighborhood disagreements. The sentence lingered longer than any raised voice could have. The HOA president slowly folded his hands. He looked first at Karen, then at the reports, then toward the audience. Finally, he spoke. I think the board needs a private executive session before taking any vote. Karen stared at him. For the first time since she became an HOA board member, the meeting was no longer moving according to her agenda. As board members quietly stood and carried the binder into the conference room, the community hall remained frozen in silence. Daniel stayed where he was. He didn't chase them. He didn't celebrate. He simply waited. Because truth had finally entered the room. Now it could do its work. Justice didn't arrive with applause. It arrived with a door quietly opening. Nearly 20 minutes after the board entered executive session, the conference room door swung inward. Conversation stopped. Every homeowner in the audience looked up. The board members returned one by one. Their expressions had changed. Gone were the casual smiles that had filled the room before the meeting began. Now there was only seriousness. The HOA president took his seat and adjusted the microphone. Thank you for your patience. His voice sounded heavier than before. After reviewing the submitted documentation, police reports, public records, governing documents, and video evidence, the board has reached a unanimous decision. Karen turned toward him. For the first time that evening, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. The violation issued to Mr. Daniel Carter is hereby rescinded. A quiet breath swept through the audience. No cheering, no celebration, just relief. The president continued. The associated fine is permanently withdrawn. Daniel simply nodded. Nothing more. The president wasn't finished. Our review also identified concerns regarding repeated misuse of board authority and procedural inconsistencies in previous enforcement actions. Every word landed carefully, measured, official, effective immediately. All future violation notices involving public common areas will require review by multiple board members before issuance. Another pause. Additionally, an independent review committee will examine previous enforcement records to ensure consistent application of community rules. Karen stared ahead without speaking. The board member seated beside her quietly collected the stack of unsigned violation notices from earlier that evening. Without asking, without announcing it, he simply removed them from her reach. The gesture lasted only a few seconds. It said everything. The HOA president looked toward Karen. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice softened. Pending completion of the review, you are relieved of enforcement responsibilities. No one gasped. No one needed to. The silence itself acknowledged the moment. Karen opened her mouth as though searching for words she had always expected would come easily. None arrived. Years of certainty disappeared without a single argument. Across the room, Eleanor Brooks quietly smiled into her folded hands. Not because Karen had lost, because fear finally had. Outside, the summer air felt lighter. Neighbors lingered in small groups beneath the parking lot lights. People who had barely spoken for years suddenly introduced themselves to one another. Someone thanked Daniel. He smiled politely. Another apologized for staying silent during the soccer incident. Daniel simply replied, I understand. He meant it. He climbed into his truck with the same black binder resting on the passenger seat. It no longer felt heavy. The following Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood park looked almost identical to the week before. Sunlight stretched across the grass. Parents unfolded lawn chairs. Children laughed before anyone told them to. Ethan carefully placed the soccer ball at midfield. He looked toward his father. Is it okay? Daniel smiled. It always was. The first kick sent the ball rolling across the open field. No police cars arrived. No shouting echoed through the park. No one reached for a phone. Only the sound of children playing beneath an endless blue sky. Across the street, Karen watched quietly from behind her living room window. The curtains remained only slightly open. She saw neighbors wave to one another. She saw Eleanor carrying another casserole across the street. She saw Daniel sitting on the same park bench where everything had begun. He wasn't watching Karen. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was watching Ethan laugh. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone else was wrong. It's creating a place where they no longer have the power to steal your peace. The afternoon breeze carried the distant sound of a soccer ball striking the back of a small portable net. Daniel closed his eyes for just a second and smiled. Not because he had defeated Karen, because his son no longer asked if they were going to lose their home. Some victories never appear in official meeting minutes. They live in ordinary Saturdays, in children who play without fear, in neighbors who finally speak, and in the quiet dignity of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard.